Hi, I'm Matthew McCabe. Welcome to Miracle Voices. Each episode, we will be delving into stories of forgiveness, healing, and transformation that have come about from integrating the principles of the book A Course in Miracles. If you want to learn more about A Course in Miracles, visit www.acim.org. If you'd like to visit the Miracle Voices site, please go to www.miraclevoices.org. If you feel inspired to make a love offering, please visit us at miraclevoices.org/donate. All donations go to support the work of the Foundation for Inner Peace, the publisher of A Course in Miracles. Now here's your program. Just a quick note before we get started today. If you would like to submit your forgiveness story for consideration for the podcast, please go to miraclevoices.org/form. That's miraclevoices.org/form. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Miracle Voices. This is your co-host, Matt McCabe, here with my co-host, Tam Morgan. Tam, welcome. How are you doing?
Thank you. It's a good day.
Good.
Although I do not know what anything is for.
Good.
We'll see.
Good.
Doing good. How are you doing, Matt?
Doing well, thanks. And
Good.
I'm excited for our guest today, Cindi Gatton. Cindi, welcome to Miracle Voices.
Oh, great to be here.
Good. Well, Cindi, where are you beaming in from here? Where are you sitting right now in the world?
So this morning,
Yeah.
this morning I'm sitting in Atlanta, Georgia, sometimes known as Hotlanta, but it has not been hot here for the last month.
Yeah. Gosh, yeah, this Arctic blast. And where are you from originally? Are you from someplace else? Because there's a lot of relocation going on to Atlanta.
I've been in Atlanta long enough that I call it home now, but
You
I
made the
was
full conversion.
Exactly. I was an Air Force brat and moved a lot growing up. So Atlanta's home now.
That's good. That's good. And are the peaches truly better in Georgia, do you think?
Ooh, that's a tough one because actually South Carolina produces more peaches than Georgia does.
Wow. Okay, I didn't know that. That's a nice little factoid. Okay. Cindi, please tell us, how did A Course in Miracles come into your life?
You know, I love hearing people share this part of their story because it's clear to me that for some people, the course comes in like a tornado and it grabs them and they're off to the races. I like to think of the course coming into my life more as I was sort of swimming in the Course in Miracles soup for a long time before I decided to put a spoon in it and take a taste. When I was in college, I went to school in Virginia, and Edgar Cayce was all the discussion. And I was really interested in books written by a guy by the name of Hugh Prather, who I learned later actually, was one of the first course students. I didn't know that at the time. But if we fast forward from then to 1991, I was married. I had two young sons. And I was struggling with a really deep depression. I thought that the root of the depression was the fact that my mother was ending her life's journey. She was in the last stages of ovarian cancer. And I was fortunate enough at that time, I had a medical sales career and I was in a doctor's office and I saw cards for a bunch of therapists, different therapists. And I pulled one out and I called and really hit it off with this particular therapist. And like many of us who enter counseling, I thought I knew why I was there. It turned out I didn't know at all. One of the things that she really focused on was she would give me books to read based on some of the different things we were talking about. And I had grown up in a family where the only emotion that was permitted to be expressed was anger. And it was only permitted to be expressed by my father. And I learned that I think there's a book by this title, Buried Feelings Never Die. And that I've also heard depression described as anger turned inward. And that was very much what was going on for me at that time. In the course of working with this therapist, and I'm so grateful that it was a time when insurance wasn't saying you get 10 visits and then you're done. So my journey with her extended over more than a year. But I went in one day, and sitting on her stand there was a book, and I glanced at the title, and it said A Return to Love. One of the things I've been really struggling with is that the marriage was not working. And in my family, the rule was that no one got divorced unless your husband or spouse beat you, was doing drugs, or stole from you. And none of those things were true. And I was really pained trying to come to terms with that. And she handed me the book, and she said, I really think you would like this. There's some information in here that really speaks to what relationships are for. And so I read it cover to cover. And this notion that there were only two emotions, love or fear, really resonated with me. But a lot of the metaphysical description, the description that Marianne Williamson had in that book, just kind of like flew over my head. But I realized it was a book about a book. And so I went to my Barnes and Noble. That dates me, I'm sure. But went into my Barnes and Noble to look for this book called A Course in Miracles. I found it, I bought it, and I started reading it. I've heard other course students in my circle talk about how when we first find a course and we read it, we may not understand it. And that was true for me. I mean, it felt like a jet plane flying 30,000 feet over my head, but there was something about it that just felt peaceful. And at the same time, while I was swimming in that soup, my therapist had introduced me to other writers that had been mentioned here by other guests, people like Wayne Dyer and Carolyn Mace and Louise Hay, and the list goes on. So I was still swimming in that course soup until some years later, a friend of mine said, "Oh my God, I just read this great book. I think you would love it. It's called The Disappearance of the Universe." And so Barnes and Noble was still in existence at that time. I ran in, I bought the book and started to read it. And I've also heard people describe Disappearance as the can opener for the course. And that was exactly what it was for me. I went back, I started reading it again, I started doing the lessons, and this time it stuck. And things have never really been the same since. Gary introduced me to Ken Wapnick. I was fortunate to do one of his 5-day seminars here in Atlanta. And then I went out to Temecula and did a seminar with him in the year before he died. And I still listen to him. He's one of the people that helps me make sense of the course.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So
Yeah.
you go way back here in a lot of detail, great teachers, great books going on. That's wonderful. As you kind of digested all this new information about forgiveness, did you notice your life changing in any way, Cindi?
I think that's a really important question because my answer is no, not immediately. One of the things that my therapist taught me, which she was not a course student, but it really aligns with the course, is she started teaching me to really pay attention to my thoughts, to hear what was going on in my mind. And as initially, I don't think that changed anything for me. They were interesting, and I could often take them back and we would talk them through in a session. And that really helped me to begin to understand that I was the thinker and not the thoughts themselves. Certainly, as my study of the course got deeper, that understanding really started to get much, much deeper. And Tam, I heard your mom discuss many times the discipline that's required to do this. And I would say that I dabbled up until the
Mhm.
time that I found Disappearance of the Universe, at which time I was able to take some of the things I had learned and start to discipline them somewhat so that when I would feel an upset or something happening, whether it was out in the world or in my more immediate life, it started to become more automatic. I won't say that it's always automatic, but it became more automatic to step back and hear what was going on in my mind. And more often than not, it was the ego, not Holy Spirit. And that was when things really started to change, when I really began to understand that I could choose which of those voices I wanted to hear. That is my superpower, and it's a superpower we all have. It Things started to really shift then.
Hmm. And Cindy, do you have a forgiveness story you'd like to share?
At the point that things started to shift, there were forgiveness stories left and right. Once I began to really appreciate what the Course meant around forgiveness, because I think in the early days when I was reading it, I was, like many people, stuck on a language that the Course's definition of sin and guilt were really different than those definitions that I had grown up with. And as I began to understand that differently, there would be little miracles, little changes in perception that just made for a more peaceful day. But one of the bigger ones, and I hear this to be true for many of us, is with our family of origin. And I shared a little bit about my dad. My dad was not an easy person to be around. His He could be really fun, but his default emotion was anger. And I have a younger brother, and there was a younger sister that was born in my family who did not survive. And my parents had wanted a big family, and my mother was not able to have more children after that child died. And it was also what I like to think of now as kind of the Mad Men era, that if you had a white collar job, you came home at night, you had a cocktail, and then went on about the rest of the evening. And that started at the time that I was a small child, and over the years, the one cocktail turned into 2 and then 3, and then many nights, uncountable. And sometimes they were happy nights, and sometimes they were really unhappy nights where there was a lot of verbal and emotional abuse, mostly to my mom. But as kids, it was absolutely terrifying. And my dad was also of the school that if you spare the rod, you spoil the child. So a lot of our discipline now, I think, probably would be described as abusive, but it worked. I mean, what it did is I became the quintessential good girl, and making sure that I had his approval so that I could avoid his wrath became kind of a way to cope with the world. It's not a very healthy way, but it was a great way to cope with the world. And it contributed a lot to the issues that I was facing in my marriage. Um, as it turns out, I did leave my husband. My father did not speak to me for 3 months. And then he kind of came around. And during that time, after my mother had died, my dad remarried. And the marriage was short-lived. I'm sure that his anger probably had some impact on that as well. But he left his second wife and moved back to Ohio. And not long after he moved back, he was diagnosed with metastatic lung cancer. Because he had friends there, but not anybody to really kind of support him. I started flying back every 3 weeks when he would have treatment, and to make sure that there was food for him after I would leave, and to kind of take care of him in the first couple days after his treatments. And in that period of time, there was a lot of healing that happened. We would sit at night, we would have conversation about a lot of different things. And one of the things my therapist had encouraged me to do, and I never really had the opportunity to do it, was to ask him about his life, to learn a little bit more about how he became this person that he was. And there was lots of great sharing, and I so appreciated that. But one night we were sitting having conversation, and he got quiet for a minute, and he turned and he looked at me and he said, "Was I a good father?" And in that moment, I know that in real time, I shouldn't say real time, in illusory time, probably 2 seconds passed before I actually opened my mouth and said anything. But in that 2 seconds, it was like time expanded. And I heard my ego voice kind of scoff, was he a good father? Oh my goodness. How in the world are we going to answer that? But more importantly, my ego said very clearly, I got nothing here that's kind. Holy Spirit, you take this one. And I can remember kind of having this also inner comment going, Holy Spirit, put the words in my mouth because I have no idea what to say here. And I hearken back to the prayer in chapter 2, which I have posted in my little office, especially the last line that says, I will be healed as I let him teach me to heal. And I had come to understand that to mean that my mind will be healed. I will choose love as I let Holy Spirit help me extend that love. And so in that 2-second interval that felt like I'm watching all this stuff going on in my mind, I looked at my father and I said, yes, Daddy, you were a good father. You made sure that I always had clothes on my back. You made sure that my belly was always full. You supported me in everything that I wanted to do. You were proud of me. You were a good father, and you are a good father. Because in that minute, I understood that what would be a good father to him is what I was supposed to share, not what I'd needed for him to be as a good father to me. And I looked at him, and the relief on his face was pure love. And we moved on to a different topic after that. And I felt completely different. I knew that in that moment, my judgment of all the ways in which I thought I had been treated unfairly, I was able to see past that and to see what was real. And it's a defining moment for me when I have trouble coming up with for real forgiveness as the Course would teach it. I'll often go back to that moment because it was palpable.
Mm.
That is so, so beautiful. And what's also wonderful about that is one can even do it after one's father has passed or one's mother. That moment, it's really wonderful in what I'll call real time, even though it's not, to experience that one-on-one. But it also can be done at any point with any ancestral relative that you're harboring something against, and it seems to travel through time to heal that, and then your parents, and then your children, and it has a funny little insidious way of moving through everything, but really beautifully said. Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's so true because it always makes me think of like when you take a rock and throw it into a very still, smooth lake and you watch the ripples go out. I think every moment, little or big, that we are able to practice forgiveness as the Course teaches is a ripple like that. We don't know
Yeah.
where it goes or what it touches, but what changes is how we feel. And that change in perception is everything.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's really you were also earlier, and I didn't want to interrupt the flow, but you were talking about discipline and how you weren't disciplined with the Course, and then something sank in more deeply when you started to learn the definitions of things in a more experiential way, the Course definitions, and the discipline happened. And I used to say all the time, because I do not consider myself a disciplined person. I'm obsessive. So people think I'm disciplined because if I have a task, I will not stop till it's done. But that's obsession. Discipline, the daily routine of doing something calmly is not has not been my strength. But I used to, something turned in me when I thought, oh, discipline has the word disciple in it. And if you're a disciple of something, you do it for love. It's devotional. And so then the discipline becomes easier. And I love that little wordsmith thing that I did until someday someone called me on it and showed me Latin root, and it has nothing to do with the same word. But I don't care. I don't care. It's not the root. It actually has a connection to me. Because when you love something, you do it. And the more
Yeah.
the more you get to love knowing you have a choice of your ego's voice or to hand it over to spirit, you get to do that. That gives you the discipline, or it can, I should say.
It really does. And I would say for myself, I wanted to be that person that sits down and takes 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 3 minutes every day to do my course practice. And I am not disciplined in that way. But it is a course in training our minds how to think. And the more you do it, the more automatic it becomes. And then when you do choose to sit down with a lesson or to just let the book fall open and see what's there when something's going on, it shifts the perception automatically.
Yeah, it's really extraordinary. Also, what I found, and I've heard from many people that um, for some of us, it's easier to have it read to us. So I have a friend who
Mm-hmm.
goes, a really close friend who goes out to Stinson Beach with her earphones in and hears the course read to her. And it's so different than her sitting and reading it. And it comes in a whole different way so that the discipline of listening to the course every day is much easier than the discipline of reading the course. And we all have our channels and our ways that work for us.
Wow, that is so true. I know I was in a study group for a number of years that disbanded when we ended up having to do it via Zoom, that we really would have preferred to do it in person. But
Mhm.
we would read a paragraph at a time. Each person would read out loud, and it really did open up your understanding about something that might have felt really confusing to hear somebody read it while you followed along, and a different voice for each
Mhm.
paragraph, so that my tendency is when it gets overwhelming that I'll get a little drowsy. And when there's a different voice reading each paragraph, it just focuses one's attention.
Interesting. That would be a fun little trick in the app when we have different voices to do that. To suddenly, okay, you want this paragraph read through that voice, and then like random generated motor voice switching to
Mm,
read.
mm.
I like that. I had another friend who actually got a little book podium, like a book stand, like as if he was, in church and reading off of a podium, where he would go specifically to read the course out loud to himself because that was his best way of teaching him.
That
Cindy,
might be fun to try. Oh, I'm sorry, Matt, go ahead.
no, no,
Yeah,
please.
no, no, no. I mean, everybody has their way, and it just gave him the discipline. If he would go over to that little podium, the book was on it, and he'd start reading it, and it went in.
Cindy, there's two sentences from the state of sinlessness in A Course in Miracles that I feel like just captured perfectly that decision moment you had with your your dad and how you're going to respond. And man, we, we can all feel that, like what's going. This is a face off here. Who's going to win? And but I'll just read those two sentences that just jumped out to me. Look once again upon your brother, not without the understanding that he is the way to heaven or to hell as you perceive him. But forget not this: the role you give to him is given you, and you will walk the way you pointed out to him, because it is your judgment on yourself. And it's
Mm,
like, wow, it's like,
Wow.
yeah, it's
yeah,
like,
that
you're I mean, just nothing captures it better. It's just heaven or hell, what do you want? But you're gonna get what you give here, even though it seems like it's gonna be so satisfying to blast like a flamethrower of a grievance on them.
great,
Yeah.
great reference, Matt. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, what is I forgot the states. I always forget sayings, but they're in my auric field of who's the one taking the poison.
Mm.
You know,
Mhm.
you think that you know the other person, you want them to take the poison if you're angry with them, but you're the one who's taking the poison.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Speaking of course quotes, Cindy, is there any one that you find comforting or you go back to a lot because it's so helpful or appropriate for you?
Yeah, there's actually two. One comes from the text, chapter 12, and it says, "The power of decision is your one remaining freedom as a prisoner of this world."
Mhm.
Whenever I find that I'm veering off in the wrong direction, I remember that there's always the power to choose again. And that is really the only power that I have.
That's a great one.
Yeah. Yeah. The other one is
Mm.
from the text, chapter 15. And this was one, especially after that moment with my dad, that I keep and go back to when I'm having a difficult time with another perceived body. And that one goes like this: "As the ego would limit your perception of your brothers to the body, so would the Holy Spirit release your vision and let you see the great rays shining from them, so unlimited that they reach to God."
Yeah, talk about two different interpretations, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Those are great ones.
The
Really good.
great race is the whole subject unto itself.
Yeah.
indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Oh,
Yeah.
wonderful.
Mm.
And
Beautiful. Thank you for those.
yeah, and Cindy, when you get caught in a ego storm and it doesn't seem like anything's working, and you feel like a terrible course student, and you've got all this training in you, and it doesn't seem to be working, and I'm frustrated. What do you do? What do you do to get back on track?
Well, I wish I could say that after, I don't know how many years it's been since, I have really been studying the course, that those moments still happen.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
what I've come to the kind of the way that I've come to deal with those is I allow them. Because if I recognize that I'm in a just a mess at the moment in terms of how I'm thinking, if I start applying my judgment to it, "You're a bad course student, you shouldn't feel this way," say when I start shooting on myself of what I should do or shouldn't do or whatever, that sometimes the most important thing for me is to simply allow it, because my mind will recognize that this was the power of decision and I chose wrongly. I can choose again when I'm ready. And I remember Ken Wapnick talking about time as sort of like a carpet. And we imagine that it's this linear thing, but it really isn't. And so, however long it takes me to get to my right mind, which I am happy to report, the more disciplined you are with appreciating this course, the shorter those perceived intervals become. But what I do afterwards, when I finally get back to my right mind, I will sit down and I will write about it. For me, that kinesthetic thing, not to type it on the computer, but to write it, of what was I thinking? How did I feel wrongly perceived or wrongly treated? That's an illusion. Where did that come from? And then to sit down to just be still and to be in that forgiveness place, to try to see the great rays in the other person and in myself.
Mm, that's beautiful.
Wow.
And Cindy, what is your favorite comfort food?
Yeah.
I have to tell you, I never go to the grocery store anymore where I see heavy cream that I do not think of you, Tam.
And you wouldn't have it any other way, would you, Ted?
Well, it's very funny. Okay, wait, I wanna hear comfort food, and then I'll come back to I have to tell you something about.
Well, it's for those, I mean, I think I've been listening to this podcast since your very first episode, and I don't think I've
Wow.
missed a single one.
Well,
Um, and I feel like I've gotten to know you both, even though I've never met you, just by listening, Tam. I think about you with your little container of heavy cream.
yeah.
How important that is. And Matt, I have to confess, I don't I you have gotten really into the European treats, and I don't always remember those. They aren't as immediate in
Yeah.
my consciousness, but my favorite comfort food, if I really just need to settle and just enjoy something, I'm a Midwest girl. I will make meatloaf, garlic smashed potatoes, and fresh steamed green beans with butter and some almond slices. And I will make my mother's famous buttermilk sugar cookies for dessert.
Wow.
Yum.
This was a whole meal presentation here, Cindy. I
Love
wasn't prepared
that.
for that.
Yeah, I don't have a single
love that.
food.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. No, that's really paints a picture, even with the
Yeah.
almonds and everything.
Well,
Yeah.
yum. That makes me hungry.
Yeah.
I will tell you that my son is seeing a new woman in his life, and he's gone back to visit her in New York. And I was on the phone with him last night, and suddenly I'm talking to one of her roommates, and the roommate is quizzing me about my flask of heavy cream. Like, why do I do it? Do I do it all the time, or do I do it just when I know I'm going somewhere that would need it? Because isn't it a pain to like have to keep dumping out the flask, and does it get bad quickly? And it wasn't until, and we were talking about it, we were laughing about it, and I sent them a picture of it because my son keeps saying that's not a snuff spoon, it's a Coke spoon, Mom, that you use when it gets like whipped creamy after the day of walking around in my purse. And I'm like, I don't care what it is. For me, it's a whipped cream spoon to dig out of my little flask. Anyway, it wasn't until after I hung up where I realized this is what my son is telling about his mother.
Yeah.
It suddenly hit me. This is what my son finds important to share to someone about his mother. And it just cracked me up. So it's very funny that you say that as well. I guess I'm kind of getting to be known for my little flask that no one has ever known about because I just quietly keep it in my purse. And like someone, would drink alcohol, I take it out outside and quickly pour it into something and hope no one notices. And now I've been like, I have to go to Blast Free Heavy Cream Anonymous or something.
No, this is the quirkiness level, Tam, is off the charts for that one little detail. It's like, what the type of person that would have this in their life that they're so committed to it is like, it just speaks. It's just so interesting. I have to know more. It's like something from a Wes Anderson movie. That's all I can say.
That was the question that this woman asked me last night was, have you ever met anyone else who does this? And I never thought about that. Like,
are you a group?
Yeah, should I send out something like to the universe and go, anyone else out there doing this with the little Coke / cream spoon? In one's purse, and it's so little. It's only enough for heavy cream for maybe 2 cups of anything. I mean, it's just a tiny little flask, but it cracked me up. So, okay, well, thank you for bringing that one up.
I think whatever magic gets us through the night is A-okay.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So, yeah. Anyway, well, thank you for. I really love your meal. It's actually one of my favorite meals, but I can't have the garlic part, but all the rest. Love it.
Well, I have to say, the mashed potatoes, if you're going to make them from scratch, they have to have half and half. I've never done them with cream. Yeah. They've got to have half and half. Milk does not work.
Try them with heavy cream. Try them with heavy cream and butter.
Where do you
heavy
come
cream
down?
And butter, the heart attack version is really delicious.
Cindy, where do you come down on lumps in mashed potatoes? I know it's people like lumps and some people don't like lumps.
Oh, I think it depends.
It's exercise.
Yes, yes. I think it depends entirely on the size of the lump because it depends on what kind of potatoes you use. I mean, some of them just smash right up and there's nothing there. Depending on what potatoes are in the pantry, sometimes they have a few lumps. And if they're not really big, they're okay. It's a little texture in them.
Yes.
Yeah, it really matters so much more how much cream is in there.
Okay. Well, real butter is also required for those. Yeah.
Totally. Yep. Yum.
Cindy, before we say goodbye, can you tell us, is there any way you want to connect with listeners that might be interested in saying hi?
Oh, I would love that. I'm actually in the process of establishing a website, cindigatton.com. I mentioned that I write to process kind of things that happen when I am trying to live the course day by day. And I wrote and self-published a book with the help of D. Patrick Miller at the Fearless Books, who helped Gary Renard publish his book. It's a tiny little book. It's called Dying to Awaken, Parting the Veil to Heaven. And
wait a second.
I sent you one, Tam. I did. I sent you a copy.
What? I have not. I have been so busy for 9 years. I really haven't been reading. And I'm not kidding. I mean, just like, but yesterday evening, I've been doing a major clearing. We're having a board meeting and people are staying here, a major clearing and cleaning. And I found that book and I took it and it's like, what am I going to do with this book? Because I trying to put everything away and it was in a box that I was clearing. And it's the only book now with all of the translations of the course books. Literally just sitting with all the translations. It got taken out and put there. And I went, this is the only place that feels right for this right now. So I can't believe you said that. I guess I have to read it. At some point when I have a vacation, I will read it.
Well, it's a short little book. It's easy to read in one sitting, but there's a link to it on the Fearless Books website. You can find it on Amazon. But I've also been, as I journal, I am wanting to start a Substack called Miracle Musings, because the way that we find the peace from this course is in the everyday stuff that happens to us. So as I get that website up, and in the meantime, if anybody wants to write, they can write to Cindi. And my mother spelled my nickname oddly. It's Cindi, Cindi at cindigatton.com. And I would love to hear from anybody.
Okay.
Oh, and you might want to even call it Miracle Amusings.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Yeah, silly,
thank
not
you,
serious.
Tim.
I absolutely give that to you. Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm happy to give credit where credit's due.
Yeah. Spirit is where all credit's due. Yeah.
Well, Cindi, thanks so much for coming on Miracle Voices and sharing your miracle voice. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for listening today. Please subscribe to Miracle Voices by hitting the subscribe button on your podcast app. If you are enjoying these conversations, please consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcast app you use. And lastly, please visit us at miraclevoices.org and join our newsletter so we can stay connected. Until the next podcast, I want to leave you with my favorite course quote: "When you want only love, you will see nothing else."